so I make my living as a writer. And a writer's life doesn't have a lot of great moments in it. It's mostly a life of rejection. But I actually had a bona fide great moment as a writer, and it happened right here in Athens. So my family moved to Battle Creek in 2005, and in 2006 I started writing a column for the Inquirer, which I'm still writing. And shortly after I started, a complete stranger came up to me and said, "Are you Nicole Mullis?" And I was like, "Yeah." She was like, "I really like your work. It reminds me of Leslie Reardon. Did you work with her?" I didn't know this name, so I just said no and kind of forgot about it. Then it happened again a couple months later. Then it happened again a couple months after that. Same compliment, same comparison, same question. So I called my friend who lived in Battle Creek her whole life, and I said, "Who's Leslie Reardon?" She's like, "Oh, Leslie Reardon is a longtime Battle Creek Inquirer columnist. She lived in Athens. She passed away in 1999. You would have liked her. Her work and your work are kind of the same." And I'm like, "Yeah, I've heard that." But now it made sense to me why I didn't know who this was. But I continued to run into Leslie Reardon's fans on the regular, and they were quite passionate fans. In fact, this one lady, when she found out I had never read any of Leslie's columns, took the time to send me a copy of Leslie's book with a letter that said, "Return this book as soon as you are finished with it. It is a loan, not a gift." So I was a little intimidated, not just because I had to return it, but because this was the woman whose column legacy I was unwittingly carrying. So I started reading it, and I was done in about 2 days. I really enjoyed it. And I could understand why people saw some similarities. It seemed Leslie and I shared a similar sense of humor. We delved into the same pots for source material, namely the foibles of parenthood, our family, community, chocolate. But most of all, I think what I liked about her, why I felt like we had something in common, was she wrote about that sometimes she knew it was hard for her husband and her 2 daughters to have her writing about their family life in the local paper. And I was like, you know, only someone who was doing what I was doing would know that. So I returned the book. I would have much rather kept it. So earlier this year, I was in Athens High School watching a girls' varsity basketball game between Athens and St. Philip. My daughter played on the St. Philip team, and they were having what is best described as a rebuilding year. Athens girls' team was having what is best described as a special year, so the score was a little lopsided at halftime, and the parents on my side of the gym weren't talking very much, except for one. She sat down right next to me and said, "Hey, did you ever work with Leslie Reardon?" I was like, no, I never had the pleasure. She's like, "Well, I used to coach her daughter, and that daughter now has a daughter, and she plays on this basketball team." I was like, "Really?" So the second half started. I kind of flipped the basketball roster over, started looking down the names. But I didn't know what the last name would be, so I just, kind of kept score. The game ended. We lost. We lost so bad that my husband was taking his customary cool-down lap in the parking lot, which meant I was the parent standing in the gym waiting for my daughter to get out of the locker room. And I had already processed the loss. I had bigger problems. I had a column due the next day, and I hadn't written anything, which is why I was wearing my laptop in a bag on my back. Now, I've never once written a column during a basketball game, but I tend to carry it around when I'm close to deadline, like a cross. So I don't know if it was the bag or that I looked really bad, just like my mugshot in the newspaper. But this stranger came up to me and said, "Are you Nicole Mullis?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I really enjoy your columns. They remind me of my mom's." And I stopped. And this weird thing happened. I started to get nervous, like the talking nervous where you don't breathe. And I was like, "Oh my God, I've been hearing about your mom so much for the last 12 years. And this one lady, she sent me her book, and I read the book, and I liked the book. And one of the columns I liked was when the electricity went out in your house, and on and on and on and on. Until my daughter showed up out of the locker room all sweaty and angry. And instead of consoling her on her loss, I pushed her in front of me and introduced her to Leslie Reardon's daughter. And that's when I shut up, because Leslie Reardon's daughter and my daughter had this conversation about what it was like to be a teenager when your mom writes about your family life in the local newspaper. And the whole time I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. And also thinking to myself, I'm so writing about this, but I can't. And I did. It shaped up into a pretty good column. But I made sure to take a page out of Leslie's book and thank both our daughters for being such good sports and excellent source material. And about a month later, my editor calls from the Enquirer and says, there's a package here for you. I go into the office, and it was from Leslie Reardon's daughters. They gave me a copy of Leslie's book, which they signed on the front cover under the inscription, "We're sure Mom would have been your biggest fan." And that was a great moment as a writer. Made even greater by the fact that I didn't have to return that.